Hi guys, excuse me. Hi guys, we're now going to move on to the second lecture for chapter 4. So the first lecture we talked about mens rea. So this lecture is going to talk about all of the other elements that are required to prove criminal liability. Okay, so we're going to cover the rest. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you and we'll work through the rest of the elements. Okay, so just like we did for the other class, the other lectures, remember we keep talking about criminal liability. In order to find somebody criminally liable, you have to show conduct, no justification or excuses, which are going to be the defenses that we're going to talk about the next 2 weeks, harm to an individual or public interest. We're still on conduct, okay? So we talked about mens rea, we talked about actus reus, but we still have to talk about the other elements of conduct, the other elements of a crime. So this is where we're going to talk about concurrence, harm, causation, and attendant circumstances, so you understand what each of those are, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is concurrence. So we talked about mens rea, the guilty mind. We talked about actus reus, the guilty act. Concurrence means both of these occur at the same time. So not only do you have a guilty mind, you're committing the guilty act at the same time that you have a guilty mind. If you want to do it, but you don't do anything, then there's no concurrence. If you do something, but you weren't really thinking about it, you have no concurrence. Both of these things must occur at the same time. Okay, so think about this. Alice is driving on the road and is run off the road into a ditch. Bob is really mad and he tries to run over Annie after his car is removed from the ditch and he misses. A week later, he's not so mad anymore. He doesn't really want to kill Annie anymore. He's driving down the street. He looks to change the radio and runs her off the road and kills her. So the question is, do you have concurrence? Do you have intent to act and act at the same time? And the answer is really no. You did want to do it, but you didn't. And then later you accidentally did it and you weren't thinking about doing it. So both these things have to occur at the same time. Now you're probably like, come on, Mrs. Wicker, that's ridiculous. How would you ever prove that? And I understand it's hard to prove, but I just wanted to try to give you an example of how it would not actually occur so you understand, okay? So that's it for concurrence. It's just pretty easy. Mens rea and actus reus have to occur at the same time. The next thing we have is harm. So on top of having concurrence, we have to have harm. So harm is some sort of injury to something, okay? So if you're looking at the example in the picture, what kind of harm is that man suffering? Well, you're not going to physically hurt him. You don't have a gun, right? But are you causing emotional or psychological harm? So you have to think of harm in a very general sense. It's not just physically hurting somebody. It could be psychologically or mentally hurting them. It could be hurting their morals or values. It could be hurting property. So think of harm very broadly. So I have some examples. You start to protest against the law you believe is wrong. You tweet all your friends to show up on Main Street and rush at rush hour and block traffic. All your friends show up and disrupt traffic. So the question is there harm? Is this a harm? And the answer is yes. It's harming public order. You're keeping cars from driving. So it does harm public order. What about this? You start to protest against the law you believe to be wrong. You tweet all your friends to show up on Main Street, block the traffic. Your friends show up with guns and fire at the police. Well, what is harmed in this situation? And this is a harm against a person. If you're shooting at people, then that is a harm to a person. Then you have, you start to protest the law, call your friends, block traffic, and they all disrobe and start to have sex on the hoods of the cars. What is being harmed? Well, public order, but also morality. So we have certain crimes that we say are against the law because we want to maintain a certain standard of morality in our community, right? And if people are violating those morals, then that is harm to morality. You call your friends, they block traffic, and they loot all the stores and break into houses along the street. What is the harm in this case? A harm to property. So lots of things can be harmed. My point is it's not always just physical harm to a person. If anything is harmed, you can count that as harm. So you have to have some harm to something for criminal liability. Okay. Now, this is the hardest one that we have today. This is called causation. So causation is the idea that you have to prove as a prosecutor that the defendant's actions, the actus reus, are what caused the harm. Because somebody could be harmed, but it may not be because of what the defendant did, because of the actus reus. So if somebody's just walking down the street and just trips on their own feet, nobody caused that to happen. In order to have criminal liability, you have to show that it was the defendant's acts that caused the harm. Now, there's two ways to prove causation. You can have what's called factual or but-for causation. This is a clear link between the harm and the act. So if I take out a gun and shoot somebody, it's a clear link. My actions caused the injury. Now, sometimes though, you can only show what's called proximate cause. Proximate cause is when you set in motion a chain of events that lead to harm. So remember, we've talked about natural and foreseeable consequences. So sometimes you start something in motion, even though you may not have intended the ultimate result. But if it's a natural and foreseeable consequence of something that you set in motion, that's proximate cause. And you can be liable for proximate cause too. It doesn't just have to be factual, but for causation. You can be responsible for both. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Oh, so this, I just wrote it out. So, but for causation is the direct actions cause the injury, pick up a gun, pull the trigger. Proximate cause, the results are the natural and foreseeable consequences of a person's actions. So it's natural and foreseeable consequence that you could kill someone if you're speeding through a school zone. So you may not have intended it. It wasn't a direct thing that you meant to cause, but you set in motion something that was happening, and it was a natural and foreseeable consequence. So that is the proximate cause of the person's death. Okay, so let's look at some other examples. Latman walks into the store and points a gun at Maladio and demands money from the cash register. Maladio becomes so frightened he suffers a heart attack and dies. Is Latman responsible for his death? So does he directly kill him himself? Is it but for causation? No, he doesn't actually do something that causes his death. But does he set into motion a pattern of events, and it's a natural and foreseeable consequence that he could suffer a heart attack and die? Yes. So that's going to be your proximate cause. It is a natural and foreseeable consequence. What about this one? Brad steals a car and is speeding away to avoid the police and hits and kills a small child. This is direct causation, right? You directly, but for you doing it, this would not have occurred. Brad's direct actions cause the injury, okay? Yuri fires a pistol and hits Paul and only slightly injures him. Paul is taken to the hospital where the doctors provide him with negligent care and Paul dies. Should Yuri be charged with murder? So the question is, does Yuri directly kill Paul? Proximate cause or direct but for causation? No, he just injures him. So is it a natural and foreseeable consequence that somebody's going to go to the hospital and receive negligent care and die? And the courts have said no, okay? It would be proximate cause. You did set it in motion, but remember, it still has to be a natural and foreseeable consequence. And it's not really, we don't anticipate going to the hospital and getting bad care and dying. So this would be a much harder crime to charge. So it doesn't mean Paul walks away with nothing, but you may have to drop it down to a lesser offense, like an attempted murder or a first degree assault. So you just may not be able to charge a murder, but you may be able to drop it down to a lower offense. Okay. A man is smoking by a gas pump and it blows up. The explosion sends metal flying in the air that strikes a bystander. Is that person responsible for the bystander's death? Absolutely. Proximate cause. I shouldn't have this all pop up, but it's messed up. So proximate cause, right? You set into motion a series of events that led to the harm. So what if the explosion shakes the ground, causing a medic who is inserting an IV in the nearby ambulance to penetrate too far in the patient's neck and kill the patient? I would argue no causation, right? He didn't directly do it. And I don't think that's a natural and foreseeable consequence. It's pretty far-fetched, okay? So that's causation. So that's all the elements. So now you understand what each element are required. Oh, one that's not, I don't have on here is attendant circumstances. So before we're done, remember that attendant circumstances are additional requirements that the law may require. So they don't really fit into any of those categories that we just covered. So I'll give you an example. So for burglary, it's breaking and entering in a dwelling at nighttime to commit a crime. Well, at nighttime is sort of an additional requirement. It doesn't really fit as concurrence or harm or elements. We're going to list those all as the actus reus. So if you have at nighttime, just list it as one of the actus reus. But the law, the book will talk about them as attendant circumstances. They're just certain additional requirements that the law added. Okay, so now I want to take everything that we learned and put it all together. So here's a couple problems. So now you know how to find something in the penal law. So look it up in the index, find the section, find the actual law then in the penal law book. We know how to read it and determine the mens rea. We know how to read it and pick out the actus reus. And then you also, as a refresher, remember how to locate the class of crime. Remember A, B, C, D, E felony or A or B misdemeanor. So you look at the bottom of the crime and find where it says class. And then we take that class and we look at the sentencing section 70 or 7015 and find out what the sentencing range is for these crimes. So stop the video and look up both of these two crimes and try to write the section, write the mens rea, write the actus reus, write the class, and write the sentence range. So once you're all done with that and you're ready to roll, start the video again and you can check your answers against the time. Okay? Stop the video and then start it when you're ready. So hopefully you actually did it. So you would find escape, third degree is section 20505. Hopefully you wrote mens rea and just one word, it's multiple choice, intentional. Actus reus, escape from custody. That's it. Well, that's how you do it. Mens rea, intentional, actus reus, escape from custody. Class, it's an A misdemeanor. So we use 7015 and we know it's up to 1 year. Okay. The next one was unlawfully using slugs, first degree, 17060. Mens rea, intentional. There's actually two intents, right? Intent to make and intent to deposit in the machines, okay? So there's actually two intentionals. If you were a prosecutor, you'd have to show that they intended to make and possess, and they intended to use it in a machine. Actus reus, make, possess, or dispose of slugs. The value of each slug exceeds $100, okay? So a lot of you probably thought this was slugs bullets. This is slugs like fake coins. So you have to show that the person made, possessed, or disposes of slugs, and the value of the slugs was over $100. So when you look up the class, that would have been class E felony. So then you use section 7000. First, you find the maximum range. So we know the maximum range always starts at 3. And then we look down for a felony, and we know E felony goes to 3 to 4 years. And then we know we go back to the minimum. And the minimum is going to be 1. So the range is 1 to 3 to 4 years. Okay. So hopefully you understand that. There's a little assessment quiz if you need a little more practice on elements and want to practice with them. You can go online and take it. It doesn't count, but you'll be able to understand the elements. And then you can participate in your discussion for this week. So you're going to read the Kitty Genovese case, and you're going to discuss the ideas of conduct and all of the elements and whether all the elements can be proven against the witnesses. So when you're reading, don't get confused. We're not talking about the man that actually kills Kitty Genovese. We're talking about the witnesses. So you're going to take everything you learned with mens rea, actus reus, all the rules, ways to act, levels of mens rea. You're going to put it all together, and you're going to answer the questions for the discussion. Okay? So just like always, if you have any questions, please reach out. I'll be happy to answer any of them. And otherwise, I will see you next week. Oh, don't forget that we're now done with elements. So now it's time for your next exam. So make sure you go back, study chapters 3 and 4, and then chapter 2 exam will be open on Thursday, and you'll have till next Thursday to take it. So good luck, and ask any questions if you have any before you take it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.